For 32 years, Joni Mitchell carried a secret that would have destroyed her career. In 1965, something happened that she couldn't talk about. Not to her parents, not to her fans, not even to her closest friends. She put the pain into her songs instead. Millions sang along to Both Sides Now without knowing the truth. In 1996, she finally broke her silence. What she revealed shocked everyone. But the real tragedy happened when she tried to fix the past. Joni Mitchell was born on November 7, 1943, in Fort Macleod, Alberta. Her full name was Roberta Joan Anderson. From the start, life wasn't easy. Her father, Bill Anderson, served as a flight lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Because of his job, the family moved a lot from base to base across Canada. Her mother, Myrtle, worked as a school teacher, trying to keep some sense of order. But the constant moving made Joni feel like she never truly belonged anywhere. She was always the new kid, always adjusting. This feeling of not having a place to call home would stay with her and shape her art in powerful ways. It was this early restlessness that later poured into her songs about longing and identity. When Joni was 9, in 1953, she got polio. It was a terrifying illness back then. She spent weeks in the hospital, away from her family and friends. The disease left her back twisted and caused her pain that lasted for the rest of her life. Years later, she would also suffer from post-polio syndrome, which brought back weakness and fatigue. That fight with polio taught her how fragile life could be, but it also made her stronger inside. You can hear that fight in her music, in the way she sings about survival and struggle. During that same difficult time, Joni did something unexpected. At just 9 years old, while still recovering from polio, she started smoking. It was her way of rebelling, of taking control when everything else felt out of her hands. The habit didn't harm her voice, though. That voice went on to become one of the most unique and celebrated in music. Even as a child, she showed the boldness that would mark her entire career. School was never easy for her. Joni didn't care much for regular studies, but she fell in love with painting. That was where she truly shined. She saw herself as a painter first, and her eye for color and detail shaped the way she wrote songs. She went to art school to develop her skills, and that visual sense stayed with her in her music. Her lyrics painted pictures, and her albums felt like works of art. In grade 12, Joni made a bold move. She dropped out of school. That choice took her down a risky path. She found herself hanging out with people who lived on the wrong side of the law. She later admitted she got too close to that world. But even in that dark chapter, she gathered stories and feelings that would later fill her songs. Somehow, she pulled herself out and chose music as her way forward. In 1964, Joni was 19, an art student in Calgary, when her life took another hard turn. She became pregnant. The baby's father, a fellow student, abandoned her. His only response was to hand her a poem. That was it. No help, no support. Joni was left completely alone, facing the shame and fear of single motherhood at a time when society was cruel to women in her situation. When she gave birth to her daughter, Kelly Dale Anderson, she kept it a secret. Not even her parents knew. That was how deep the fear of disgrace went in the 1960s. Joni hid the pregnancy and the birth, struggling on her own through all the pain and worry. In the end, she made the hardest choice of her life. She gave up her baby for adoption. It tore her apart. Her friend Lori Wilson said it was like hell for Joni. She mourned deeply, but she saw no other way. There was no father to help, no money, and the weight of society's judgment was too much. That heartbreak stayed with her and shaped who she became. It gave her songs their depth and their honesty. Joni couldn't speak openly about the pain, so she put it into her music. She started performing in coffee shops, pouring her grief into every song. That sorrow became her strength. It gave her art a power that set her apart. It made her songs personal and true. Her style became known for its rawness and courage, and it inspired other artists to be just as open. In early 1965, Joni Mitchell was just 21 years old. She was living in Toronto, trying to make it as a folk singer. At the same time, she was facing the harsh reality of being an unwed mother in a society that judged her at every turn. She had a newborn daughter named Kelly Dale Anderson. The pressure and shame were crushing her. That March, in a small folk club called the Penny Farthing, she met Chuck Mitchell. He was 29, tall, confident, and already part of the New York folk scene. Their meeting was fiery from the start. Joni told him he'd messed up the lyrics to a Bob Dylan song during his set. Chuck, instead of being offended, was drawn to her spirit. Within 36 hours, he asked her to marry him. They waited 2 months and got married in June 1965. Joni thought this marriage might be her chance to get her daughter back from foster care. She was desperate for stability, and Chuck seemed like her best hope. But what seemed like salvation soon became something else. The marriage wasn't born from love. It was born from Joni's need and Chuck's promises. He told her he'd help her reclaim her daughter, but after the wedding, that promise faded. The focus shifted to their careers. Kelly was eventually put up for adoption. Joni kept that heartbreak hidden for decades. The pain of losing Kelly and the betrayal she felt from Chuck weighed on her. What she had hoped would bring her peace only brought more sorrow. Chuck didn't just fail to help Joni, he made things worse. When Joni shared her new song, Both Sides Now, he laughed at her. He made her feel small. That song, which the world would later love and celebrate, was dismissed by the man she thought she could trust. His criticism shook her. Again and again, Chuck chipped away at her confidence. He controlled their money. He made sure they performed as a duo so that she couldn't shine on her own. He didn't want to raise another man's child, and he didn't want Joni's star to rise higher than his. Joni felt trapped. She had married him hoping for freedom, but instead, she found herself in a cage. In 1967, after less than 2 years of this painful marriage, Joni left. The divorce was final that year. She packed up and drove alone to New York City. That drive changed everything. On her own, in a city full of artists and dreamers, she found her voice. She found her strength. The scars from her time with Chuck didn't vanish, but they shaped her. They gave her music its raw honesty. They helped her become the artist the world would come to admire. Joni Mitchell turned heartbreak into songs that spoke to millions. And in leaving Chuck, she began the journey that would make her a legend. In the fall of 1967, something unexpected happened that would change music forever. David Crosby, who had just been kicked out of the Byrds, found himself wandering into a small club called the Gaslight in Coconut Grove, Florida. On that stage was a young Canadian named Joni Mitchell. The moment Crosby heard her sing, he was stunned. He later said, "It felt like falling into a cement mixer." He was swept up in the power of her voice and her words. This was no casual meeting. Crosby fell for her, both as an artist and as a partner. He convinced her to come with him to California. There, he helped her sign with Reprise Records and produced her first album, Song to a Seagull, which came out in March 1968. Crosby wanted everything to sound pure and natural. He even had her sing into the open lid of a grand piano to catch the natural echoes. The result was a beautiful, raw sound, though it left a bit of tape hiss in the final recording. That night in Florida didn't just launch a career, it created a partnership that helped shape the music of a generation. Before most people even knew Joni Mitchell's name, her songs were already becoming hits, just not in her own voice yet. In the mid-1960s, other artists saw her brilliance. Judy Collins made Both Sides Now a top 10 hit in the US and UK in 1967. Collins also recorded Chelsea Morning, while Tom Rush turned The Circle Game into a folk favorite. Fairport Convention and Dave Van Ronk covered her songs too. Tom Rush even made Urge for Going popular. These covers helped Joni get the respect she needed. By the time she released Song to a Seagull in 1968, her songs were already part of the folk music world. She had earned creative freedom before most fans had even heard her voice. Joni's second album, Clouds, came out on May 1st, 1969, and it changed everything for her. With songs like Both Sides Now and Chelsea Morning, the album climbed to number 31 on the US Billboard 200 and number 22 in Canada. The big moment came at the 1970 Grammy Awards. Clouds won Best Folk Performance. Joni became one of the few women at the time to win such an award. The album showed how much she had grown. The lyrics were more personal. The music was more daring. In time, Both Sides Now would be ranked number 171 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs ever. That Grammy didn't just give her a trophy, it gave her the freedom to explore and take risks in her music. In April 1970, Joni released Ladies of the Canyon, and this album made her a true star. It reached number 27 on the Billboard 200 and eventually went platinum. It had songs people still love today: Big Yellow Taxi, Woodstock, and The Circle Game. Big Yellow Taxi became a hit around the world. It reached number 15 in Canada, number 6 in Australia, and number 11 in the UK. The album showed how Joni could blend folk, pop, and rock into something new. This wasn't just another folk album, it was the sound of an artist at her peak. When Joni moved to Laurel Canyon in the late 1960s, she entered a world of music legends. She lived at 82117 Lookout Mountain Avenue, a house made famous by Graham Nash's song, Our House. The canyon was alive with creativity. Musicians like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young lived nearby. They inspired each other. They wrote songs together. Joni's house became a gathering place for this incredible group of artists. The friendships and collaborations that grew there shaped the music of the 1970s. And Joni was right at the heart of it all. In 1970, Joni left behind the spotlight and took off across Europe. She spent time on the Greek island of Crete, in the village of Matala. There, she lived simply, among artists and travelers who stayed in caves by the sea. She learned to play the Appalachian dulcimer, and that sound would shape her next album. In Matala, she wrote Carrie and California, songs that captured the spirit of her journey. This time in Europe helped her find a new voice, one that would lead to her masterpiece. That masterpiece came in June 1971. It was called Blue. The album was raw and honest. Joni herself said, "It felt like she had no secrets left." The songs were about heartbreak, love, and finding herself. They came from her time in Europe and from her complicated relationships with people like Graham Nash and James Taylor. The music was simple, just her voice, a piano, a guitar, or a dulcimer. That simplicity made the emotions hit even harder. Blue showed the world what it meant to truly open your heart through music. Blue was a success from the start. In the US, it made it into the top 20 on the Billboard 200. In the UK, it climbed all the way to number 3. That was huge for a folk album in the early 1970s. Over time, Blue sold more than 1 million copies and earned a platinum certification. Critics loved it. They called it bold, beautiful, and game-changing. The album showed what a singer-songwriter could really do. It opened the door for so many others to follow. As the years passed, Blue only grew in stature. In 2003, Rolling Stone ranked it number 30 on its list of the 500 greatest albums ever. By 2020, it had risen to number 3. NPR even called it the greatest album ever made by a woman. The power of Blue comes from its honesty. The songs still speak to people today, and artists across all genres continue to learn from it. Among its 10 tracks, 2 songs stand out as true classics. A Case of You is a tender, aching look at love. The line, "I could drink a case of you and still be on my feet," has touched hearts for decades. Musicians from Prince to Diana Krall have covered it. River begins with, "It's coming on Christmas, they're cutting down trees," and draws listeners into its world of sadness and longing. Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark came out on January 17, 1974. It changed everything for her. This album took her far from the folk music she started with. She moved into a smoother, jazz-influenced pop sound. The change wasn't small. It shook up her career. The album shot to number 2 on the US charts and hit number 1 in Canada. It sold over 2 million copies worldwide and became her best-selling album ever. The single, Help Me, reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. That made it her only US top 10 hit. Free Man in Paris, inspired by David Geffen's struggles in the music industry, climbed to number 22 on the Hot 100 and number 2 on the Adult Contemporary chart. Her music grew so complex that regular rock bands couldn't handle it. She had to work with jazz musicians. Critics loved the album. Court and Spark was named the best album of 1974 by The Village Voice and was added to the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2004. It proved she could take risks and still win over fans. Around 1975, something unexpected happened. Mitchell's clear mezzo-soprano voice started to change. It dropped into a deeper contralto range. People noticed her bright upper notes fading. Her voice turned husky and rich. Some blamed her smoking, since she was known as one of the world's last great smokers. But Mitchell said it wasn't just that. She talked about vocal nodules, a compressed larynx, effects from childhood polio, and natural aging. Instead of fighting the change, she embraced it. She found her new voice more expressive. Her songs gained a haunting, deep quality that fit the mood of her later work. Albums like Hejira in 1976 showed off this new sound. The change let her push her music into fresh, unexpected directions. Mitchell didn't stop there. In 1976, she teamed up with a young bass genius, Jaco Pastorius. She wanted someone who could break free from the usual way of playing. Pastorius's fretless bass gave her songs a voice of its own. His playing shaped the sound of Hejira in 1976, Don Juan's Reckless Daughter in 1977, and Mingus in 1979. Sometimes it felt like his bass was singing along with Mitchell. Their partnership wasn't always easy, but it made both of them better. Even more surprising was her work with Charles Mingus. In 1978, Mingus was ill and knew his time was short. He asked Mitchell to help bring his last musical ideas to life. Their album, Mingus, came out in 1979. It mixed his complex jazz with her poetic lyrics. Mingus passed away before it was finished, but the album stands as proof of what they created together. In November 1976, Mitchell released Hejira. The album's name means journey. It matched the themes of the music: travel, loneliness, searching for meaning. Pastorius's bass was at the heart of the sound. On songs like Coyote and Black Crow, his bass didn't just support the tune, it led it. Sometimes his bass even outshone Mitchell's guitar. She said Pastorius wanted to be turned up in the mix so much that she felt like his background singer. The result was an album that sounded stronger, darker, and more daring than anything she had done before. The lyrics spoke of longing, change, and the endless search for belonging. The album became a favorite for fans who wanted more than just a pretty tune. Mitchell didn't just sing and write. She controlled almost every part of her art. She produced most of her albums, which was rare for women in the 1970s music business. She also designed many of her album covers. Her covers weren't just pictures. They were paintings and sketches she made herself. Her first album, Song to a Seagull in 1968, had a trippy, colorful cover she drew. Later, her turbulent Indigo album in 1994 had swirls inspired by Van Gogh, showing her emotional state at the time. To Mitchell, music and art were one and the same. She once said she was a painter first and a musician second. By taking charge of both, she made sure every album felt true to her vision. In 1996, Mitchell did something deeply personal. She was 51 and struggling as the effects of childhood polio returned. But something else weighed on her. She hadn't seen her daughter for 32 years. In 1965, at age 21, she had given up her baby girl for adoption. Now, she couldn't bear the distance any longer. She hired private detectives to search for her daughter. It was a hard, emotional process, but she wouldn't give up. Finally, the search paid off. She found out her daughter, once named Kelly, was now Kelorin Gibb. Kelorin had become a model. People were amazed at how much she looked like Mitchell in her younger years. Their reunion became big news. The photos of them together touched the world. It seemed like a dream come true. For a while, both mother and daughter were filled with joy. People called it a fairy tale ending. But the happy ending didn't last. Within a few years, things fell apart. By 2000, trouble between them had grown so bad that the police came to Mitchell's house. Kelorin said Mitchell had hit her. The media was stunned. The perfect story was shattered. Behind the smiles and hugs had been tension, anger, and pain. The weight of their long separation, the glare of fame, and old wounds all came crashing down. The reunion, once full of hope, turned into another source of heartbreak. Mitchell pulled back from the world. The dream of healing had become yet another scar. It was a painful reminder that even the deepest bonds can break under the strain of time, fame, and regret. Joni Mitchell's battle with Morgellons disease was one of the strangest and most painful medical struggles of our time. In 2010, She called it a weird, incurable disease that seems like it's from outer space. That's exactly how it felt to her. The symptoms were so bizarre that even doctors didn't know what to make of them. Only about 13,000 people in the United States have reported having morgellons, and the condition's name dates back to 1674, when it was first mentioned in a medical paper. What made it so shocking were the colorful fibers that seemed to grow out of her skin. No one could explain them. They didn't match anything known. No animal, no plant, no mineral. Some scientists thought they came from the body itself. Others believed they were just threads from clothing that had worked their way into the skin through scratching. The debate was fierce. Many doctors said morgellons was not a disease at all, just a mental disorder that made people think they had parasites crawling under their skin. But Joni's fame kept the conversation going, and her suffering was very real. She described the horror in vivid detail. She saw fibers in black, white, red, and blue coming out of her skin like mushrooms after the rain. They weren't just on the surface. Sometimes they formed deep inside, causing slow healing sores, the itching, the biting, the crawling feelings. It was like torture. A study showed that 43% of skin samples from morgellons patients had fibrous material. Many of those fibers turned out to be cotton. Still, some researchers insisted that the fibers were made by the body's own cells. For Joni, the disease meant much more than strange fibers. It brought crushing fatigue, joint pain, nerve problems, and deep mental anguish. She said it felt like being eaten alive. Every day came with fear that the disease would attack some vital organ and leave her bedridden for a year. It was like living under threat from an invisible enemy. The disease trapped her at home. For nearly 7 years, she rarely went outside. She couldn't perform, couldn't travel, and couldn't enjoy simple social moments. Her career stopped. Even basic tasks became hard. The sores wouldn't heal. The fatigue was relentless. The nerve symptoms made everything worse. On top of that, people doubted her. Some doctors thought she was imagining it all. This made the isolation even harder to bear. Then came the morning of March 31st, 2015. Joni was found unconscious on the floor of her Bel Air home. She had suffered a brain aneurysm, a medical emergency that kills about half of its victims before they even reach the hospital. The fact that she survived was almost a miracle. The music world held its breath, unsure if she would make it. The rumors flew. Was she in a coma? Would she ever recover? The answers came slowly. The aneurysm left her unable to speak, walk, or take care of herself. She called it a return to infancy. She had to relearn how to talk, how to walk, how to do the simplest things. For someone who had fought through polio as a child, this was an even greater loss. Her hands, her voice, everything she needed for her art were gone. But she didn't give up. Day after day, she worked through therapy. She watched old videos of herself to relearn how to play guitar. Doctors said her recovery was a miracle. Most people with an aneurysm like hers either die or live with lifelong disabilities. But Joni worked until she could sing and play again. Her journey back was long and hard. Years of therapy, endless exercises to rebuild her body and mind. Even when she started to walk and talk again, it wasn't easy. She still struggled, but her will to return to music kept her going. In 2017, more than 2 years after her aneurysm, she appeared at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party. Fans were amazed. After nearly 24 years without playing guitar for a paying audience, she took the stage at the Newport Folk Festival in 2022. At 78, she sang Big Yellow Taxi and Both Sides Now. The crowd was moved to tears. Clips of her performance spread across the world. Rolling Stone called it a triumphant and emotional comeback. In 2021, she was awarded the Kennedy Center Honor, a mark of her lasting impact on American culture. And she wasn't done. In 2023, she performed at the Grammy Awards and at a major benefit concert, each time reminding the world of her talent and strength. Every appearance became a celebration of her resilience. Joni Mitchell's story is one of survival, determination, and the unbreakable bond between an artist and her art.